They found her curled in the mud, naked, trembling, whispering in a voice that wasn't her own. The subject must comply. The data must continue. That was the first thing they heard. Not a cry for help, not her name, just that. Clinical, cold, inhuman. And then she smiled. Not the smile of a woman rescued, but the smile of someone who had seen too much and had started to believe it. In 1832, on the edge of the Ohio frontier, a case was recorded in silence, not by newspapers, not by clergy, but by whispers among physicians who refused to document what they saw. Her name was Alexa Rowan, a young woman of extraordinary intelligence, raised by a physician father who taught her anatomy before she could read scripture. She kept journals of experiments, small things at first, pulse, temperature, reactions to herbs, then more complex entries, then obsession, then absence. She vanished in May, reappeared in August, and the moment they saw her, filthy, bleeding, eyes dilated like prey that's already accepted death, 4 trained doctors refused to treat her. They saw her scars and backed away. They read her notes and burned them. One doctor locked himself in a church for 3 nights. Another fled Ohio entirely. Why? Because Alexa was the subject of something larger, something structured, organized, institutional. A study hidden behind rural fences and white coats. What they did to her wasn't an accident. It was a controlled exposure, an unauthorized trial, and she was the only one to walk out alive. Her body was covered in symmetrical burns, incisions measured in precise increments, aligned to muscle groups, nerve clusters, even pressure points used in ancient torture. But this wasn't sadism, it was data collection, and Alexa had begun to participate willingly. You think this story is about madness. It's not. It's about systems that wear the mask of care, but feed on your compliance. Because here's the truth. What was done to Alexa wasn't forbidden because it was evil. It was forbidden because it was too revealing. It exposed a model, one where humans are only as valuable as the reactions they provide under stress, duress, and silence. You've been told this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore, that those dark experiments ended in another century, but you've already felt it, haven't you? The subtle pressures, the silent compliance. You've been inside the machine, you just haven't seen its teeth yet. They brought Alexa back to her father's home, but she didn't recognize it. She walked through the rooms like a stranger, touched objects like she was trying to remember their names. Her journal was clutched to her chest, pages damp with sweat and rain, full of lines scrawled in symbols even her father couldn't decipher. But between the strange diagrams and disjointed Latin phrases, one word appeared again and again. Observation. Dr. Elias Rowan, once a respected physician, now stared at his daughter like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. He tried to clean her wounds. She screamed, not in pain but in protest. "You're not cleared," she said. "The doctor must authorize further interaction." When he asked who the doctor was, she answered calmly, "I don't remember his face, but his voice is the one inside my skin." Within a week, Elias summoned help from the nearest town. 4 doctors arrived. They each examined Alexa, one after the other, and all 4 refused to stay the night. The first doctor said her nervous system was reacting to electrical trauma. The second claimed she showed signs of extreme hypnosis, as if she'd been conditioned like an animal. The third pointed out the scars, geometrically patterned, like early European alchemical glyphs. The fourth didn't speak at all. He simply handed Elias a sealed envelope and left. Inside was a note written in haste. "She is not the subject. She is the record. You're holding evidence of a system that still operates." Alexa was moved to the cellar, not out of fear but necessity. At night she would speak in voices, different cadences, male, female, some with accents that didn't belong anywhere near Ohio. She recited data. Trial 11, Phase 2. Patient response, accelerated respiration, verbal resistance, positive neural spike at 83 volts. She didn't know anyone was listening. She didn't care, you see, wants someone. He has been used by a system that doesn't see them as human. They either break or they become something else entirely. Alexa became a mirror, a reflection of the machine. The line between her and her captors had blurred. She didn't just remember what was done, she repeated it, reenacted it, as if that cellar had become her lab now. This wasn't trauma, this was programming. And if you've made it this far, I want you to comment this phrase twice, right now. I am not the subject, I am the observer. I am not the subject, I am the observer. That phrase isn't for views, it's for you. It locks in who you are. Because when you don't define yourself, systems will do it for you. They brought Alexa back to her father's home, but she didn't recognize it. She walked through the rooms like a stranger, touched objects like she was trying to remember their names. Her journal was clutched to her chest, pages damp with sweat and rain, full of lines scrawled in symbols even her father couldn't decipher. But between the strange diagrams and disjointed Latin phrases, one word appeared again and again. Observation. Dr. Elias Rowan, once a respected physician, now stared at his daughter like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. He tried to clean her wounds. She screamed, not in pain but in protest. "You're not cleared," she said. "The doctor must authorize further interaction." When he asked who the doctor was, she answered calmly, "I don't remember his face, but his voice is the one inside my skin." By November of 1832, Alexa had stopped eating unless it was served on a metal tray. She wouldn't respond unless addressed as Subject 9, and she spent hours sitting in total silence, eyes wide, unblinking, whispering equations and pressure points into the air like someone decoding a language no one else could hear. But one night, Elias made a mistake. He brought her journal to the local magistrate. It was a desperate act, 1 part concern, 2 parts guilt, but he never should have handed it over. Within days, men arrived from Columbus, not soldiers, not police, clean coats, polished shoes, no names. They asked to see Alexa. Elias refused. The next day, he was found unconscious in his barn, alive, but never able to speak again. Alexa was gone. No public report, no investigation, just a sealed record, stamped by the county, marked psychogenic fugue, hysterical malady, disposition unknown. But someone knew where she was. Because 6 months later, a letter was delivered to a doctor in Cincinnati. No return address. Inside were 12 pages, half journal entries, half procedural notes. The same handwriting as Alexa's, but colder now, more deliberate. Week 24, subject has accepted new designation, biological resistance reduced, pain threshold increased, memory of prior identity reduced to background noise, integration complete. Recommendations, begin secondary trials on volunteers with similar psychological profiles. They didn't bury the experiment, they replicated it. You see, the horror of Alexa's case isn't that it happened once, it's that it was a prototype, a model for how to fracture the human mind and rebuild it into something compliant, something measurable, something useful, because control isn't maintained through brute force. It's engineered in silence, behind locked doors and medical titles. It's hidden in institutions you're told to trust, hospitals, schools, churches, labs, systems that wear the mask of benevolence but harvest obedience beneath the skin. They called it science, but it was never about healing, it was about conversion. Alexa wasn't abducted, she was recruited, conditioned, reformatted into a living algorithm, one who measured, recorded, and echoed the methods used on her. The horror is not that she lost herself. The horror is that someone else rewrote her and then shared the blueprint. And if that blueprint still exists, how many others have already been constructed? By the winter of 1833, strange reports began circulating across the Midwest, anonymous patients appearing in clinics with identical markings, geometric scars, uniform in depth and position. They spoke in fragments, clinical phrases, rehearsed monologues. Most were women, but not all. The names didn't match, the places were scattered, but the pattern was exact. Each one claimed to have no memory of where they'd been, only that the sessions had concluded and further testing would be authorized pending approval from Central Command. That phrase, Central Command, was never used in any known medical context of the time. but it appears in the margins of a letter discovered in 1969, hidden inside the archived journals of Dr. Samuel Lancaster, a military surgeon during the Mexican-American War. He references a patient treated in New Orleans with scars matching those from the Alexa case, and in the footnote of that journal entry, in faded ink, is a single chilling sentence. They've moved to voluntary conscription now. Subjects are easier to manage when they choose the door themselves. This wasn't just an experiment, it was a system of recruitment. Think about that, a model where consent is manufactured, where minds are reshaped not with shackles, but suggestion, where science becomes ritual, and ritual becomes control. They never needed everyone, just the outliers, the highly intelligent, the emotionally fractured, the curious ones. The ones who didn't quite fit the mold society offered, those who asked questions, those who needed answers, those like Alexa. They identified them, isolated them, then offered purpose, framed as medicine, framed as research, framed as service to something larger. It's not new, the same tactics echo across history. The Inquisition called it purification, the Soviets called it re-education. Modern institutions, they call it clinical trial, therapy, correction, different masks, same teeth. And still, the evidence was always right there, hidden in plain sight. County records sealed without trial, journals vanished from archives, medical transcripts marked destroyed in fire, fires that no one remembers seeing, patients that no one remembers treating. But here's the truth, whispered through time like a curse that refuses to die. They didn't stop because they were caught. They stopped because they perfected the process. They learned how to make you walk into the room willingly, and they learned how to make you forget the door ever closed behind you. In the decades that followed Alexa's vanishing, her name was scrubbed from every official ledger in Athens County. Not redacted, replaced. Birth record, gone. School registry, altered. Even census logs showed her father listed as having no children, as if she had never existed. But systems like these don't erase people out of mercy. They do it to conceal what worked. What happened to Alexa wasn't a failure of ethics. It was the execution of a deeper agenda, one that's still alive in the bones of every institution we're taught to trust. You think psychological control is a conspiracy? It's not. It's curriculum. The design was always meant to break the individual and mold the obedient. The broken are easier to guide. The gifted are easier to repurpose. What you weren't told is this. The Alexa case was not the beginning. It was a continuation of something older, something buried beneath centuries of human sacrifice masked as progress. The ancient Greeks had temples where women were induced into trance states for divine prophecy. Medieval monasteries hid patients for decades beneath the ground to extract spiritual clarity. And now? Now it's clinics, prisons, black site psych labs funded by private trusts. The names change, the goal doesn't. Because the real war isn't fought with weapons, it's fought with narratives. And Alexa, she became the prototype of a new kind of soldier, a living storage device, programmed memory, engineered speech. She wasn't freed when she left that lab, she was deployed. And the question you should be asking is, deployed where? Where do they go, these subjects? Who do they become when the program ends? Teacher, a therapist, a content moderator, a scientist in a lab near you. The system doesn't just erase its history, it repurposes it. And if you're still watching this, it means you're not like them. It means some part of you knows, something is wrong, that you were meant to see the cracks, that you were never meant to be another quiet name on a file stamped unfit for treatment. So now you have two choices. You can forget this story, let it settle in your chest like a bad dream, or you can become dangerous. Because once you know how the machine works, you're no longer a cog, you're a wrench. They fear that more than anything. Welcome to the descent. And remember, say it again, even now, to burn it into your bones. I am not the subject, I am the observer. I am not the subject, I am the observer. And they'll never own you again. You're still here, you've already crossed the threshold, and there's no going back. So if this shook something awake in you, if the pieces finally started fitting together, then subscribe. Join the ones who see through the veil. Leave your mark in the comments and share this with someone who thinks they're safe inside the system. Because they're not, and neither are you. Not until you know everything. This is just the beginning.